In the middle of the vast plains of Kansas lies Willow Creek, a town that many would describe as the perfect example of small-town life. Streets lined with maple trees, houses with freshly mowed lawns, and neighbors who waved to one another as they passed by. The kind of place where children played outside until the sun went down, and everyone knew each other's names. For years, Willow Creek had been a peaceful community, untouched by major crime or tragedy. People trusted each other, and life moved, slowly but comfortably. But in January of 2025, everything changed. It started with a single call to the local police department late one cold evening. Officers were dispatched to a modest two-story home on Maple Street. The house was ordinary, with white siding and a small porch. Nothing about it screamed trouble. Inside lived the Thompson family, Mark and Laura Thompson, and their 3 children. Emily, the eldest at 16, followed by 7-year-old Jacob and 5-year-old Sophie. To the outside world, they were a typical family, blending seamlessly into the fabric of Willow Creek. But what the officers found inside was anything but ordinary. The front door was slightly ajar when the police arrived. A chilling silence filled the house. The officers moved cautiously from room to room, each step heavier than the last. Then, in the back bedroom, they found Jacob and Sophie. The children were motionless, their small bodies cold and still. It was clear they had been gone. For some time, the town was stunned. News of the tragedy spread quickly, first as whispers between neighbors, then as urgent headlines in the local newspaper and on social media. People could not believe that such horror had occurred in their peaceful community. The questions came fast and furious. How could something like this happen here? Who could do such a thing? And most importantly, why? In the days that followed, the police revealed the unimaginable truth. The person responsible for the deaths of Jacob and Sophie was not a stranger, nor someone from outside the community. It was Emily, their own 16-year-old sister. The girl who had grown up in this very house, who had gone to school with the same children as her siblings, and who had never once been suspected of anything dangerous. The revelation shocked the town to its core. Many had known Emily as a quiet and withdrawn teenager, but no one had imagined she was capable of such a violent act. People struggled to understand what could have driven her to such extremes. The Thompson family had always appeared close-knit, though like many families, they had their struggles. Mark worked as a mechanic at a nearby garage, often coming home late after long shifts. Laura was a part-time nurse at the local clinic, balancing work and caring for her children. By most accounts, the family was loving and stable, with the parents doting on all 3 children, but cracks began to show under the surface. Those closest to the family spoke of tensions that had been growing quietly over the past year. Emily, the eldest child, had started to withdraw more and more. She rarely talked to her parents about her feelings and spent hours alone in her room. The attention her younger siblings received seemed to weigh heavily on her. Her classmates at Willow Creek High School remembered her as a shy girl who rarely spoke up in class and often ate lunch alone. Teachers noticed she was intelligent, but seemed distracted, her thoughts somewhere else. No one knew the full extent of her inner struggles, because Emily kept her feelings carefully hidden. Neighbors recalled small incidents that seemed unimportant at the time. Emily's occasional, angry outbursts behind closed doors, or the way she would watch her siblings play with an expression that some found uneasy. But no one thought much of it until the unthinkable happened. The police investigation uncovered troubling details from inside the home. Emily's bedroom revealed a series of journals and notebooks, pages filled with her private thoughts. These writings painted a picture of a young girl who felt isolated, jealous, and unloved. She wrote about feeling invisible to her parents, overshadowed by her younger siblings who received more hugs, praise, and attention. One passage stood out. Emily described a deep pain from feeling left out and forgotten. She believed that no matter what she did, her parents would never love her as much as they loved Jacob and Sophie. These feelings festered in silence for months. School counselors had tried to reach out after noticing her withdrawal, but Emily refused help and kept her distance. No one expected her hidden pain to explode in such a tragic way. The night of the eye. Murders was cold and dark, with snow gently falling outside. It was supposed to be like any other winter evening. The parents had gone out for a few hours to visit a friend, leaving the children alone. Emily was tasked with watching over her younger siblings. What happened inside the walls of that house during those few hours remains a haunting mystery. The brutality of the crime shocked investigators. The small bedroom where Jacob and Sophie had been sleeping became a crime scene, and Emily was taken into custody without resistance. The town struggled to come to terms with what they learned. How could a child who seemed so quiet and vulnerable be capable of such violence? Experts weighed in on the case, trying to understand the psychology behind such a tragedy. Some suggested that Emily's actions were the result of deep emotional neglect, a desperate cry for attention in a family where she felt overshadowed. Others believed there might have been underlying mental health issues that had gone undiagnosed and untreated. Whatever the reasons, the fact remained that the people who had loved and cared for Emily had somehow missed the warning signs. Community of Willow Creek mourned deeply. Schools held vigils, neighbors placed flowers on the doorstep of the Thompson home, and everyone wrestled with a profound sense of loss and disbelief. The story was more than just a crime. It was a warning. It forced people to look closely at the quiet struggles within families and communities, the things often hidden behind smiles and normal routines. It showed how powerful feelings of jealousy and neglect can become when left unchecked. Emily's arrest was only the beginning. The coming weeks promised to reveal more about the tragic events and the painful secrets behind the deaths of two innocent children. For Willow Creek, the shock of 2025 would never be forgotten. The peaceful town was forever changed by a darkness that had been hiding in plain sight. After the terrible tragedy that rocked Willow Creek, the community was desperate to understand what had driven Emily Thompson to kill her younger siblings. The town, once filled with quiet smiles and neighborly kindness, now buzzed with whispered questions and fearful speculation. How could a 16-year-old girl, a sister who had grown up under the same roof and been part of the same family, commit such a horrific act? The answer seemed to lie buried in the hidden corners of the Thompson household, inside a story of jealousy, loneliness, and silent suffering. As investigators continued their work, they began piecing together Emily's life from the fragments left behind. It soon became clear that beneath her quiet exterior lay a deep well of hurt. Those closest to Emily spoke carefully, revealing that she had always been a girl who kept her emotions locked away. She didn't cry for help or lash out in ways that others could see. Instead, she suffered in silence, a prisoner of her own thoughts. At school, teachers had noticed Emily slipping away from the social world around her. She rarely joined group activities and avoided conversations. Some classmates remembered how She would sometimes watch her younger siblings play during family gatherings with an expression that seemed distant, almost resentful. No one understood at the time that this was not simple teenage moodiness, but a sign of something far more troubling. Emily's journals, found in her room, opened a window into her mind. In them, she described feeling invisible in her own family. Though her parents cared for all their children, Emily believed she was the one left behind. The younger siblings, Jacob and Sophie, were showered with affection and attention. They were the stars of family photos, the subjects of praise from teachers and neighbors. Emily felt like a shadow, always in the background. The writings revealed her jealousy in raw, painful words. She described the way she imagined her parents' eyes lighting up at the sight of her siblings, but looking away from her. She believed that no matter how hard she tried to be good or helpful, she would never be loved the same way. This feeling ate away at her self-worth and her place in the family. Neighbors and family friends recalled moments that, in hindsight, seemed small but meaningful. Emily's parents often praised the little ones openly. At birthday parties, it was the younger children who were the center of attention. Emily was often asked to be responsible for the younger siblings or to stay quiet and let them take the spotlight. While this was meant as care and trust, to Emily it felt like exclusion. The emotional distance between Emily and her parents grew. Mark and Laura, juggling work and household duties, were unaware of the depth of Emily's unhappiness. They assumed she was simply going through typical teenage struggles, not realizing she was sinking deeper into loneliness and resentment. The psychological experts who examined the case suggested that Emily's jealousy had become an unhealthy obsession. The more she watched her siblings being loved and praised, the more she felt rejected and forgotten. This kind of emotional pain, when left untreated, can cause a person to see others as enemies or obstacles to their happiness. One theory from mental health professionals was that Emily might have suffered from a form of depression or emotional neglect that had gone unnoticed. Her withdrawal was a silent scream for help that no one heard. Instead of reaching out, Emily's inner world became darker and more dangerous. While some people believed Emily's actions were the result of mental illness, others thought she had made a conscious choice, fueled by jealousy and bitterness. The line between mental health issues and personal responsibility became a central question in understanding why the tragedy happened. School counselors had tried to offer support. After noticing Emily's changed behavior, they reached out to her, encouraging her to talk and seek help. But Emily rejected these attempts, preferring to keep her struggles private. Her silence became a barrier that no one could break down. Even among her few friends, Emily was a mystery. They knew she was unhappy, but didn't realize how deep her pain ran. She often spoke of feeling misunderstood and alone, but never revealed the full extent of her feelings. The family's dynamics also added complexity. Mark and Laura loved their children, but the pressure of raising 3 kids with busy jobs sometimes left them stretched thin. They tried to be fair, but the demands of caring for young children often meant the youngest naturally received more immediate attention. Emily's age and role in the family complicated matters further. As a teenager, she was expected to be more independent and responsible. This often meant she was left to manage her feelings on her own, without much direct support. Some neighbors noticed Emily acting strangely in the days leading up to the tragedy. She was seen wandering the neighborhood at odd hours, sometimes looking lost or upset. These small signs, ignored or dismissed at the time, became haunting reminders of what might have been prevented. The community began to question itself, wondering how they could have missed the warning signs. Parents worried about their own children and the dangers of emotional isolation. Schools started discussions about better mental health awareness and early intervention. Emily's jealousy was not simply about attention. It was deeper than that. She wanted to feel valued and important, to be seen as someone worthy of love. Her writings revealed dreams of a different life, one where she wasn't overshadowed by her siblings. But instead of finding ways to cope or communicate, her pain turned inward and then outward in the most tragic way. The silence surrounding Emily's suffering was broken only by the tragic events that brought her hidden feelings into the harsh light of day. Her story became a painful lesson about the dangers of neglecting emotional health and the devastating impact of jealousy left unchecked. In the weeks after the murders, family friends tried to support Mark and Laura, who were overwhelmed by grief and shock. The parents struggled to understand what had happened to their daughter and their family. They expressed heartbreak over missing the signs and felt guilty for not seeing their daughter's pain. Counselors worked with the family to try to heal the wounds left by the tragedy. Therapy sessions revealed that Emily's jealousy was rooted, not just in her family but also in her own fears of abandonment and failure. The complexity of her emotions was a stark reminder that behind every action lies a deeper story. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Emily's jealousy was the driving force behind the murders, but it was fueled by a mix of sadness, anger, and desperation. Her desire to be noticed and loved had twisted into a dark obsession. The town of Willow Creek was left grappling with the realization that beneath the surface of ordinary family life, dangerous emotions could hide. The tragedy reminded everyone that emotional pain should never be ignored, especially in children and teenagers who may lack the words to express it. Emily's story was a warning and a call for greater awareness. It showed the importance of listening closely to the quiet struggles of those around us and reaching out before it is too late. As Willow Creek began to rebuild, the memory of that cold January night and the pain behind it stayed with the community. The story of a girl consumed by jealousy became a powerful reminder that love, when not shared equally, can sometimes turn into something tragic and unforgiving. The night when everything changed in the Thompson household was one that no one would ever forget. The winter sky had grown dark early, and a heavy quiet had settled over the town of Willow Creek. Snowflakes drifted gently outside the windows, blanketing the streets and muffling the usual sounds of life. Inside the house on Maple Street, however, a storm was building. One far more violent and tragic than the weather outside. That evening, Mark and Laura Thompson had planned to visit a close friend for a few hours. They trusted Emily, their oldest daughter, to watch over her younger siblings. It was a responsibility they believed she could handle, as she had done many times before. Jacob and Sophie, cheerful and innocent, played quietly in the living room, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. But what no one knew was that inside Emily, something had snapped. The long-buried feelings of jealousy, loneliness, and despair had reached a dangerous peak. Emily's mind was clouded with thoughts that twisted reality and darkened her view of her family. She felt invisible, rejected, and overwhelmed by pain. That night, those emotions erupted into an act, so terrible that it would shatter a community. The exact moments of the tragedy remain unknown. There were no screams, no calls for help. Neighbors who later described the night only remembered the silence, the kind that feels heavy and unnatural. The small house held a terrible secret that would only be revealed hours later. When Mark and Laura returned home, the scene they found was one of pure horror. The back bedroom where the children had been sleeping was stained with violence. Jacob and Sophie lay lifeless, victims of a cruelty that defied understanding. Emily sat quietly nearby, her face expressionless, as if numb to the devastation she had caused. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late to save the children. The shock rippled through Willow Creek, where everyone struggled to comprehend the unimaginable. Emily was taken into custody without resistance. She did not fight the police or deny what had happened. Instead, she seemed distant, almost detached from the reality around her. This calmness puzzled investigators and deepened the mystery. Was it cold calculation or a sign of deep emotional trauma? As the investigation unfolded, more details emerged. Forensic experts examined the crime scene carefully. The evidence showed that the murders were not spontaneous acts of rage, but rather planned and deliberate. Emily had brought weapons from the kitchen and used them with deadly intent. This discovery sent waves of shock through the community. The idea that a teenager could prepare and carry out such an act was difficult to accept. Investigators found notes in Emily's room that indicated she had been thinking about harming her siblings for weeks. These writings described her feelings of anger and resentment growing stronger each day. The notes also revealed that she had researched methods to avoid detection, showing a chilling level of premeditation. At the same time, mental health professionals began assessing Emily's state of mind. Interviews and evaluations suggested she was suffering from severe emotional distress, possibly combined with a personality disorder that affected her ability to empathize or control impulses. But while some experts believed her mental health played a role, others emphasized her clear planning as evidence of responsibility for her actions. This tension between mental illness and criminal intent became a central question for the community, and the courts alike. Many in Willow Creek wanted to understand whether Emily was a broken girl, pushed to the edge, or a young killer with cold intentions. Meanwhile, the family's grief was overwhelming. Mark and Laura were devastated beyond words. They struggled not only with the loss of their two youngest children, but also with the betrayal by their oldest. Their pain was raw and unending. Friends and neighbors offered support, but nothing could fill the hole left by the tragedy. The town of Willow Creek itself seemed to hold its breath. Schools closed for a day of mourning. Churches held special services. Local counselors offered help to students and residents who were shaken by the news. The sense of safety and normalcy had vanished, replaced by fear and sorrow. As the days passed, the media attention grew. Journalists from across the state arrived to cover the story, turning Willow Creek into a center of grim fascination. The story was carried across television, radio, and social media, each report digging deeper into the disturbing details. Some reports focused on Emily's troubled childhood and the family's struggles. Others highlighted the emotional neglect she felt, and how it might have contributed to the tragedy. Many viewers and readers found themselves asking uncomfortable questions about the pressures faced by teenagers, the importance of mental health, and the warning signs they might have missed. Despite the growing public interest, the town tried to protect its privacy. Willow Creek was small, and most residents wanted to remember the Thompson children as they had been, joyful, innocent, and full of life. The family's tragedy became a cautionary tale about what can happen when pain and jealousy are left unchecked. The trial was set to begin several months later, and in the meantime, the investigation continued. Police worked tirelessly to understand every detail of that night. piecing together a timeline from evidence and witness accounts. They interviewed friends, teachers, and family members, looking for clues to explain what had pushed Emily over the edge. One surprising discovery came from a neighbor who recalled seeing Emily acting strangely just days before the murders. She was reportedly pacing the streets late at night, sometimes talking to herself. These small glimpses into her state of mind hinted at the turmoil she was experiencing, but went unnoticed until it was too late. Another twist came from the parents' own admission that they had been unaware of Emily's deep struggles. They revealed that they believed she was simply going through a difficult phase and had no idea the extent of her pain or the danger she posed. The community was left to grapple with these facts. How could a family so loving and seemingly normal hide such deep fractures? How could a girl who seemed so fragile plan and carry out such an unthinkable act? These questions had no easy answers. For many, the tragedy was a stark reminder of the importance of paying attention to emotional health and seeking help early. The pain and jealousy that had festered inside Emily were symptoms of a larger problem, one that might have been prevented with the right support and intervention. As Willow Creek prepared for the trial, the town remained forever changed. The night of the murders was a dark turning point, marking the end of innocence for a community that had once believed such horrors only happened elsewhere. Emily's story was no longer just a family tragedy, but a warning to all, a chilling example of how hidden pain and jealousy can explode into devastating violence when left alone. The trial of Emily Thompson began in early spring, drawing attention from across Kansas and beyond. The courtroom was filled with an intense silence as the details of the horrific crime were laid bare for all to hear. For the first time, the public would get a glimpse into the mind of the girl who had shattered a family and stunned a town. From the moment the judge entered, the atmosphere was heavy with emotion. Families who had known the Thompsons sat in the gallery, some with tears in their eyes. Reporters crowded the press benches, ready to capture every moment. The judge reminded everyone that the court's role was to find the truth and deliver justice, no matter how painful that truth might be. The prosecution began by painting a clear picture of the night of the murders. Using evidence gathered by police, they described Emily's actions in detail, how she had planned the attack, the weapons she used, and the cold precision with which she carried out the killings. They argued that her calm demeanor afterward proved she understood exactly what she was doing. They introduced the notes Emily had written, reading aloud the passages filled with anger and jealousy toward her younger siblings. These writings showed a mind consumed by bitterness, they said. A mind that decided the only way to end her pain was to end the lives of those she thought were more loved. The prosecution insisted this was a deliberate, calculated crime, not one of passion or madness. Next, mental health experts were called to testify. Their role was complicated because they had to determine whether Emily was legally sane at the time or if mental illness had driven her actions. Several psychologists spoke about her emotional state, describing signs of severe depression, social withdrawal, and possible personality disorders. One expert testified that Emily's writings and behavior suggested she was struggling with feelings of abandonment and worthlessness, which clouded her judgment. Another argued that despite her emotional issues, she knew right from wrong and had planned the murders carefully, meaning she was responsible for her crimes. The defense attorneys sought to focus on Emily's mental health, emphasizing how little support she had received. They argued that the intense jealousy was a symptom of deeper psychological problems. They spoke about how teenage brains are still developing and how emotions can sometimes overwhelm judgment. Their goal was to show that Emily was not fully in control of her actions and deserved treatment, not just punishment. As the trial progressed, chilling details emerged about Emily's state of mind in the days before the murders. Testimonies revealed that she had withdrawn even more from her friends and family, spending hours alone in her room. School counselors described efforts to reach out to her, which were ignored or refused. Even her parents admitted they were unaware of how desperate she felt. The courtroom heard from neighbors who described strange behaviors. Emily wandering late at night, talking to herself, and showing signs of confusion or distress. These accounts deepened the picture of a troubled girl teetering on the edge. At the same time, witnesses spoke about the family's efforts to keep life normal despite struggles. Teachers remembered Emily as bright but quiet, sometimes sad but never violent. Friends said she was gentle and kind but also lonely. No one had expected the darkness inside her to explode in such a violent way. One of the most shocking moments came when the prosecution presented surveillance footage from a nearby store. It showed Emily purchasing kitchen knives days before the murders, along with a detailed list of items she bought for the family. The evidence suggested a carefully planned crime, not an impulsive act. This moment stunned the courtroom and reinforced the argument for full accountability. Throughout the trial, Emily remained mostly silent. Occasionally her expression would flicker with emotion, a brief look of sadness or fear. But she did not speak in her own defense. Her attorney explained that she was overwhelmed by guilt and shock, struggling to come to terms with what she had done. As the days passed, the trial exposed the complexity of the case. It was not simply about a cruel act, but about the tangled web of emotions, mental health, and family dynamics. The jury listened closely, aware that their decision would carry enormous weight. Outside the courthouse, the community reacted with mixed emotions. Some believed Emily should be treated with compassion as a victim of her own pain. Others called for strict punishment, fearing that justice demanded a harsh response. The debate sparked conversations about mental health services, parental responsibility, and how to protect vulnerable teens. One particularly difficult issue was the age of the offender. At 16, Emily was not a child, but not yet an adult. The court had to decide whether to try her as a juvenile or in adult court, a decision that would affect her sentence and future. This sparked heated discussions about the fairness of the legal system and how it handles young offenders. Throughout the trial, Emily's parents faced unbearable pain. Mark and Laura sat in the courtroom daily, their faces drawn and tired. They spoke privately about their sorrow and confusion, grappling with feelings of guilt for missing the signs. Their once happy family was now broken beyond repair. Counselors worked with the parents, helping them process their grief and shock. They also urged the community to find ways to support families dealing with similar struggles before tragedy struck. In one of the most emotional parts of the trial, the prosecution called a child psychologist who explained how jealousy, if left unchecked, can lead to dangerous thoughts. The expert warned that feelings of being unloved or invisible in a family can grow into obsession, sometimes resulting in violence. The psychologist described how important it was for parents and caregivers to recognize early warning signs, such as withdrawal, anger, and sudden behavioral changes. The hope was that sharing this knowledge might prevent future tragedies. As closing arguments approached, the courtroom was heavy with tension. The prosecution urged the jury to hold Emily fully responsible, emphasizing the planning and coldness of the crime. The defense pleaded for understanding, calling for mercy and mental health treatment rather than punishment. The jury was left to weigh all the evidence, the pain behind the crime, the mental health struggles, the planning and intent, and the tragic consequences. Outside the courthouse, the town waited anxiously for the verdict. Willow Creek remained scarred by the events, but hopeful that justice, in whatever form, would bring some closure. Emily's case became more than just a trial. It became a symbol of the challenges faced by families, the dangers of jealousy left unaddressed, and the urgent need for mental health support. The story of that cold January night, of the broken family and the shattered community, served as a stark reminder that behind every crime is a human life, complex, troubled, and often misunderstood. The day of the verdict arrived with a heavy stillness hanging over the small courthouse. The air was thick with anticipation, tension, and an unspoken fear about what the jury's decision might mean for Emily Thompson and the community of Willow Creek. Outside, news crews gathered, and townspeople whispered quietly among themselves, all eager to hear the outcome of a case that had gripped their lives for months. Inside the courtroom, the judge called the session to order and reminded everyone of the seriousness of the moment. The jury entered solemnly, their faces unreadable, and took their seats. Everyone waited in silence, the seconds stretching longer than they ever had before. When the jury foreperson stood to deliver the verdict, the room fell utterly silent. The words spoken next would change the lives of everyone involved, forever. The jury found Emily guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a mixture of shock, sadness, and relief. For some, it was justice served. For others, a heartbreaking conclusion to a tragedy that had no winners. Immediately after the verdict, the question turned to sentencing. Because Emily was still a minor, the judge had to decide whether she would be tried as an adult or remain in the juvenile system. The prosecution pushed for adult sentencing, arguing that the premeditated nature of the crimes demanded the full weight of the law. The defense, however, advocated for rehabilitation, emphasizing Emily's young age and mental health challenges. After a tense hearing, the judge ruled that Emily would be sentenced in juvenile court, but would remain in a secure facility until deemed safe to return to society. The decision was controversial, sparking debate in the media and community, with some feeling it was too lenient and others hoping it was a chance for healing and treatment. As Emily was taken away to begin her sentence, the people of Willow Creek struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The tragedy had left deep scars, parents worried about their own children, and the community wrestled with questions about how to prevent such darkness from growing unnoticed again. Counselors and social workers stepped forward to offer support, helping families recognize warning signs and understand the importance of mental health. Schools introduced programs to teach students about emotional well-being and how to ask for help. Willow Creek was determined to heal, but the memory of that cold night lingered like a shadow over the town. Emily's parents, Mark and Laura, faced the hardest journey. Their grief was unimaginable, not only for the loss of Jacob and Sophie, but for the broken bond with their oldest daughter. In private moments, they questioned everything. How had they missed the signs? What could they have done differently? And how to forgive a child who had done the unthinkable. Mark returned to work, but struggled to focus. Laura spent many days in silence, surrounded by photos of the children and memories that both comforted and tormented her. They leaned on each other but also drifted at times, each consumed by pain. Despite the distance, they both agreed on one thing. They wanted to ensure their children's deaths would not be in vain. They joined local advocacy groups working to improve mental health resources in schools and communities. Their tragedy became a catalyst for change, shining a light on issues often hidden behind closed doors. The community's response was also powerful. Memorials were held in honor of Jacob and Sophie, celebrating their lives with stories, songs, and tears. The local church planted a garden in their memory, a peaceful place for reflection and healing. People who had felt helpless found ways to contribute, offering support to families dealing with emotional struggles and loneliness. As time passed, Willow Creek slowly began to heal. The shock faded, replaced by a cautious hope. But the story of that night, and the girl who caused it, remained a warning, a reminder that jealousy and pain, when ignored, can become something deadly. Emily's future was uncertain. The secure juvenile facility where she was held provided treatment and counseling, but her path to recovery was long and difficult. Some wondered if she would ever fully understand the pain she had caused, or if she would be haunted forever by her actions. Experts in psychology said cases like Emily's were tragic examples of how untreated mental illness and emotional neglect can lead to devastating consequences. They stressed the need for early intervention, family support, and open communication to prevent such tragedies from repeating. In the years that followed, the Thompson case became a story told in schools and community centers as a lesson in vigilance and compassion. Parents learned to watch for signs of jealousy, depression, and withdrawal in their children. Children were encouraged to speak up when they felt invisible or unloved. Emily's story, while tragic, opened conversations about the importance of mental health care and the challenges many teenagers face in silence. The hope was that by understanding and addressing these issues, communities could protect their most vulnerable members before it was too late. In the quiet moments, away from the public eye, Willow Creek's residents continued to carry the weight of what happened. They mourned the loss of innocence and the shattering of a family. They faced their fears about what might have been missed and what still might be missed in the future. But in that sorrow, there was also strength, a determination to build a better, more aware community, to ensure no child felt so unloved and desperate that they would turn to violence, to find ways to heal, even from the deepest wounds. The case of Emily Thompson, her little siblings Jacob and Sophie, and the tragedy that unfolded in 2025 Kansas would never be forgotten. It became more than a crime story. It became a story about human pain, the dangers of jealousy, and the powerful need for love and understanding. In the end, Willow Creek hoped that through their grief, lessons would be learned and lives saved. The story was a painful chapter in their history, but also a call to action, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger lies not in strangers, but in the silent battles fought behind closed doors. If you want, I can help you create a closing. Narration or suggest visual ideas to accompany this story for your YouTube documentary.